Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Messi, Mbappe, Neymar. Who has the best boots at PSG? Three of the most influential players in the world wearing three very different football boots. How do they compare? And perhaps more importantly, which of these three would be best for you? That's exactly the question that I plan on answering as we compare the usual suspects in the X and the Mercurial, but when you throw the Puma Future into the mix, how does it actually stack up against two of the most popular football boots on the market? If you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire comparison, and if you are interested in any of these three boots for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail prices by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the links down below in the description. As always, if you guys do end up enjoying the video and perhaps want to see more boot comparisons, please don't forget to support this one with a like and let me know what you'd like to see next down below in the comments. Also guys, I have a goal of hitting 750,000 subscribers on this channel by the end of the year. So for those of you that regularly watch the content but maybe aren't subbed to the channel, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. Now, while this has nothing to do with overall performance, it does affect your bank account. And if you're trying to decide between these three boots, there is a significant price difference from the most expensive and least expensive options. Starting with Mbappe's boots, the Nike Mercurial Superfly 8 Elite, it retails for $275, which is basically the top price point you're going to find from either Nike or Adidas. Messi's boot, the X Speedflow.1 from Adidas, retails for $25 less at $250, where the Puma Future Z 1.2, Neymar's boots, retail for a whopping $75 less than the Mercurials and $50 less than the Speedflows at $200, making it by far the most affordable, or at the very least the most reasonably priced out of these three options. So from a value for money perspective, given that all three of these boots are really good overall performers, the Future Z is definitely the winner. From a feel perspective, obviously the Mercurial and the Speedflow do have the most in common in that they're both really thin uppers that you would describe as having a barefoot feel. I think the big difference is that the Mercurial has a more structured feel to the upper. It's a little bit stiffer, it's a little bit more plasticky, but doesn't offer any padding whatsoever, meaning that you get that very pingy, raw sensation on the ball with the added structure in the upper really squeezing your foot as tightly as possible, where the Speedflow.1 has a thin synthetic upper that has a little bit of elastic to it. It's also way more pliable and just moves more nicely with your foot. As a result, because it just comes across as being less structured, I think it does feel that little bit thinner. But in general, I don't think you're going to notice a huge difference in the barefoot feel between either of these two boots. Where Neymar's Future Z with its EvoKnit Pro upper is significantly different from the other two options. This knitted upper has more thickness to it, it has more padding to it, it's softer, it's more sock-like, and arguably more comfortable overall, but it's also very much a personal preference thing as to whether or not you like something that has some softness to it, or if you want something that is paper thin with no extra padding whatsoever. Through the midfoot with this Fusion Fit Plus band, the boot definitely thins out a little bit, but if you're looking for more of that sock-like sensation that was popularized with knitted uppers back when they first came out in 2014, this is probably the best example of that in today's football boot market. Plus the added texturing on the surface does provide a little bit of additional grip on the ball that you won't find from the other options, but certainly from a touch perspective, this is very, very different from both the X and the Mercs. So it's not so much a case of one being best in the touch category. If you want something thin, either of these two options will do the job, or if you prefer something with a little bit more padding, arguably a little bit more protection to it, then the Future Z would certainly be a better choice. Now, I hate to say it, but this is where the Puma Future Z really does fall behind with its dynamic motion system, which is the sole plate along with this FGAG stud pattern. As far as sole plates go, it's got an interesting design to it with this Z-shaped kind of stiffener bar running through the midfoot. It's technically a split sole with a small little connection piece, but there is still a solid sole plate underneath, which is why you have these deep cuts along the side of the forefoot. Nonetheless, it's a sole plate that feels quite ordinary. It's got some flexibility to it, certainly more so than what you're going to find from the other two options. And as far as the FGAG stud pattern is concerned, this being the only FGAG boot of the bunch, I definitely think it's better suited for use on natural grass. And with these kind of half circle shaped studs, it provides decent traction. I think you do have that freedom to twist and pivot a little bit more so than what you find from the true bladed stud patterns from the other two options. But in terms of aggressiveness and outright traction and really just an impressive sensation from the sole plate, this is the least impressive of the bunch, but still very solid overall. Where the Mercs, as I'm sure you know, features this mock split sole construction, but more importantly, an anatomically shaped sole plate base, which means that the bottom of this boot is not perfectly flat like you're going to find from most other football boots out there. You sit slightly in the sole plate, which really does give you this connected sensation to the boot and increases the overall responsiveness, and that your foot is no longer sliding along the top of a completely flat surface. It's a very subtle thing, but it makes quite the difference in terms of the feel on offer from the Mercurials. The stud pattern is of course extremely aggressive, this being the FG layout, and pretty much the gold standard if you're looking for as much bite as possible. Aggressiveness is basically the best description of this sole plate, and if that's what you're after, the Mercs are going to do the best job. Where the speed frame of Messi's boots, I would argue, is the most technically impressive in that it's a standard plastic base that I think looks extremely cool. I also love the fact that it features an external heel counter, the only one of the three that has that, but then you have this Carbitex insert through the forefoot, the visible carbon fiber that provides a tremendous amount of spring back effect every single time you step in the boots. It's also designed off a sprinter spike, which means that the forefoot is slightly raised, which, similar to the Mercurial with its sole plate and stud pattern combination, does a really good job of putting you on your toes. And it's one of those sole plates where you can legitimately feel the energy return from the carbon fiber. Does that actually translate into better overall performance? Or I guess in the case of a speed boot, will it make you faster? I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it's something that feels extremely positive underneath your foot, and you notice it with every single step you take. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's bladed, it's aggressive. I would say it's a notch below what you're gonna get from the Mercurials in terms of outright bite, but certainly more aggressive than what you're gonna get from the Future Z. For me, however, similar to the Mercurial, I definitely think that the sole plate is the highlight. And if you like the idea of having something really solid underneath your forefoot, this is gonna have the best experience on offer. As for which boot wins this category, it's not the Future Z, and I guess between the Mercurials and the Speedflows, I probably lean towards the Speedflow just because I love the feel of that Carbitex insert, but they're both so technically impressive, and I guess it's a matter of what your preferences are in regards to the feature set on offer from these two boots. The X is a low-cut boot. The Future is a low-cut boot with a little bit of an extension, which kind of makes it this middle ground between a mid and a low from a looks perspective, while the Superfly, of course, is a mid-cut boot with the dynamic fit collar, but of course you do have the option of getting a low-cut variation for $25 less in the Vapor 14 Elite. Regardless of which you go for, none of these boots offer any legitimate ankle support or really any performance benefit to being low cut or mid cut. I think it's more so a preference in regards to looks, and it's not something that I think should be a major factor in your decision-making process. So from heaviest to lightest, all in the same size, 9.5 US, here is the weight difference between these three boots, starting with the Future Z 1.2, somewhat unsurprisingly. They weigh in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams, which is actually still very lightweight. Pull those off and throw on the Superfly 8 Elite, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.3 ounces, the equivalent of 207 grams. Change the scale back to ounces one more time, and we'll throw on the X Speedflow.1, and you can see they weigh in at 7.2 ounces, the equivalent of 205 grams. All to say that there really isn't that much of a weight difference between these three boots, and I don't think it should be that much of a deciding factor. So Neymar's Futures on my left foot and Messi's Speedflows on my right foot. What is the difference between the two when it comes to fit and feel? And I think despite being very different in most ways, they're both fairly forgiving in terms of how they fit. And what I mean by that is I think they are the two most comfortable football boots in this particular comparison. Not to say that the Mercs are uncomfortable, but you're definitely going to notice a big difference between these two in terms of the feel of the upper on your feet, where the Futures simply feel more bulky in comparison to the Speedflows. And I realize bulky is kind of a bad word to use. That doesn't sound like something you want in a pair of football boots, but they're certainly more padded, they're certainly thicker. There's just more substance to this football boot when you compare it to the Speedflow, which almost feels like you're wearing nothing. And the slight elasticity to the upper does relate a little bit to the Fusion Fit Plus band that you have here on the midfoot of the Future Z, which is definitely the highlight feature. This weird lacing system that kind of frees up the midfoot, where this elasticated area is kind of free to stretch to the exact shape of your foot, which gives you plenty of relief through the midfoot area, especially for somebody that has low arches like myself. If you find that that can cause discomfort for you on a lot of football boots, the fit of this Future Z is very unique in that regard, where the Speedflow kind of just grabs your foot more tightly all the way through, but it is slightly elasticated with its upper, which means that it just gives you that little bit of stretch, that little bit of forgiveness, even when the laces are tied tight. As far as width is concerned, both of these boots have decent width to them. I would say the Future Z lends itself a little bit better towards wider foot types, but in general, I think both of these football boots will fit most people quite comfortably. And as far as sizing is concerned, there is a little bit of a difference, although I am wearing both of these in a size 9.5 US. The Speedflows 100% do run true to size, where the Future Z runs about a quarter size long. Again, I'm still wearing them in a 9.5, but unless you find that your football boots are a little bit too big to begin with, if that's the case, maybe go half a size down, but for most people, true to size is probably going to be the way to go. As for Mbappe's boots, the Mercurials, it's one of the most unique feeling football boots on the market. And if you're a fan of the Mercurial series, there really isn't much else that you can buy that's going to offer the same overall experience. From a comfort perspective, again, everyone has their own preferences. I don't find these to be nearly as comfortable as the other two options. It's just tighter through the midfoot, tighter through the forefoot and toe box area. The Vaporposit upper is stiffer, it's more structured, it's more rigid, which also means that the lockdown and responsiveness, I think, is by far the best with the Mercurials when you're comparing it to the other two options, especially when paired up with that anatomic Soleplate base. But it really is a matter of personal preference in terms of what you like the feel of. If you don't want football boots that feel like they are squeezing your feet, then you probably shouldn't go for the Mercurials. As far as width is concerned, they're still going to fit most people despite their tight overall fit, because it does have some decent width to the shape. But if you do have really wide feet, I don't necessarily think that Mercurials are ever the best option. And as far as sizing is concerned, they do run true to size, as the Mercurial series has done for pretty much as long as I can remember. But in terms of comparing these two boots, there really isn't much to compare in regards to fit and feel. At the end of the day, all three of these football boots feature something unique about them that affects the experience, it affects the fit, and it's going to ultimately affect the performance as well. As for which is the best and which is the worst, I think I'm technically most impressed with the Speedflow.1, very closely followed by the Superfly, and then in last place, I guess I would rank the Future Z 1.2, but that doesn't necessarily determine how I would rank these football boots in terms of which one I would actually play in, because given the choice, as much as I like the Mercurials, it would probably be my third pick out of these three. I really like the Speedflow.1 and would be super happy to wear them, but I also know that I tend to not care for super thin boots over long periods of time, especially once I get stepped on. I am quickly reminded as to why I'm not a huge fan of them, which is why, despite being technically the least impressive out of these three, I would probably end up playing in the Future Z 1.2 given the choice. However, that's my choice. Your preferences might be a lot different than mine, which is why you need to pick out of these three based on your own personal preferences. But for the record, I think Messi has the best boots on PSG right now. Anyways, guys, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to support it with a like. Again, if you're interested in any of these 3 boots for yourself below their normal retail price, check out those links down below in the description. Any questions, as always, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. You can find all my social media information linked down below in the description as well. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.